Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now October 29th of 2022, and as we get closer to the very end of this year, a lot of Star Wars fans are embracing the new shows by Jon and Dave, like Ahsoka, Mando Season 3, and a whole lot more on the horizon, by of course Favreau and Filoni, and what they're really ultimately trying to craft with this new Star Wars universe. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel for future Star Wars updates. Also, by the way guys, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you also very much for the kind support. It is greatly appreciated. Now, one thing about the new universe between Jon, George, and Dave is that they really are building towards something that's going to stay true to Star Wars Legends. And given that there are a lot of things happening at the same exact time between what they are crafting right now and what they're trying to achieve, is that we have a lot of projects that are in different phases of development. Now, most recently, Favreau and Filoni made a very important call and decision over at Lucasfilm that really does change the game and how these new Star Wars TV shows are going to be developed and how smoothly they're going to be developed, essentially. So, there's a lot of things going into these projects that involve Jon and Dave really kind of transforming Lucasfilm as a company. And as you all know, as we had discussed a couple of weeks ago, since Jon and Dave got those big promotions, they have a lot more creative power now, and of course even more so on the business end of the Star Wars universe to a degree. We already know that Jon has control over 65% of the financial end of many of the upcoming Star Wars shows, just for starters, by the way. Now, that brings us to the next thing that's even all the more exciting, is exactly what Favreau and Filoni recently did to ensure that the upcoming shows are going to be smooth sailing when it comes to development. So, with many new creators joining Favreau and Filoni for new and upcoming projects, they recently have been making some drastic changes behind the scenes in order to regulate the franchise. As of right now, both Favreau and Filoni recently had the authority to fire and then hire, of course, a set of new crew for specific new Star Wars projects. This was said to have been approved recently by Bob Chapek, as before this, much of Kathleen Kennedy's decisions on which teams would handle certain projects were her call, where now Jon and Dave have control over that for many new projects. Now, the projects that Jon and Dave fired and replaced many Lucasfilm employees and crew members for was for the new post-Episode 9 series, Circle of the Wills, a new anthology show, the Bo-Katan series, and even the Book of Boba Fett Season 2, and lastly, the Kenobi soft reboot. Those Lucasfilm employees that were previously attached to said projects will no longer be involved with those projects, and that Jon and Dave have now made it final that they will be strictly using the Mandalorian and Ahsoka teams to handle those new and upcoming shows. So let me just stop here for a second before we get to the more involved stuff. Now, given that Jon and Dave are dedicated to their work, I mean, these are guys that are working around the clock. I've talked about this before, that Dave Filoni himself even said back in the end of September, I believe it was, that he wants to replicate that good feeling again. That really good feeling that so many fans got when they watched the original trilogy, when they watched the prequel trilogy films. It's kind of funny he didn't even mention the sequels, but he mentioned both the originals and the sequels, giving fans that good feeling. And you know what? When you see these movies on TBS, like on actual television, you do get that good feeling. You can't help yourself but to watch it through and through, regardless of commercials. And it just works. That's what Star Wars is. It needs that genetic makeup, right? In the actual filmmaking sense, where it has great rewatchable, I guess you could say nature to it. That's what they have to actually evolve to, and that's what they're trying to achieve with all of these new and upcoming shows. And in order to do that, what they are doing is that they are now getting rid of some crew and teams that were previously working on these said projects that are now being swapped by other teams that are more passionate about the Star Wars universe, more passionate about what Jon and Dave are actually doing. And that, to me, I think is going to be a very big step, not just for Jon and Dave, but for Disney. I think that Disney has one big chance here in 2023 to prove themselves that Star Wars can get back on track. Sure, Skeleton Crew might be a 50-50 chance at achieving anything at all because it's a Kathleen Kennedy-driven project, but everything else for next year, leading into 24, it's looking very promising. And you know what? I think that everything related to it, given the fact that the Mandalorian and Ahsoka crew, they are the best crew. So, moving on, of course, the ones that were let go were in favor of Kathleen Kennedy initially, and were only causing problems for Favreau and Filoni, no surprise there, on smooth business to create a positive flow of Star Wars projects. Now, Kennedy is described to be very angry about what just happened by Favreau and Filoni, and is trying to put a stop to it all, but Disney executives have already made up their mind. Kennedy is also getting ready to try and get some of those that were fired to work for the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew if she can. So once again, the crew members that John and Dave fired and told them to go elsewhere, work on other projects, Kathleen Kennedy is trying to get them now for the Acolyte. So, for those of you that don't know, all these projects, they work in their own teams, so to speak. They have their own set of crew members. It could very well be for multi-shows or specific, one-off shows. In this case, the Mandalorian and Ahsoka crew works hand in hand. The Kenobi crew was something else, and it really has a division, and either that division's positive or negative, that all depends, but in this scenario, it wasn't for the best, so John and Dave made the decision to get rid of them and swap them for the Mandalorian and Ahsoka crew for all those shows that we just labeled. Now, there's a lot of things coming our way because Star Wars Celebration next year in Europe, and yes, it does take place in Europe, is going to be by far the biggest celebration in history under Disney. That's right, it is. And the reason why is because they're going to have a multitude of announcements. It's going to be monumental, so to speak. It is going to be the one celebration where you're going to have the most announcements, the most reveals, and a lot of new teases by John and Dave of what's also going to be unveiled at D23 later on in the year. So 2023 is not just a special year for new shows like Mando 3 and Ahsoka, etc., but it's also going to be a special year for announcements. And I think that's another thing that fans really need to be aware of, is that they really need to prove to themselves and to us, the fandom, that they can really get the ball rolling again. And I do have faith that John and Dave are absolutely going to achieve that. So, of course, this really is a very interesting development here, given that Favreau and Filoni actually had the bravery of doing this, letting go of certain crew members and hiring new ones to take their place in order to create a better workflow. And I respect that, I really do. I'm not quite sure if it was personal or not, but there were issues when it came to production for those shows, because a lot of those crew members were sided with Kathleen Kennedy. So overall, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you guys have to say about all of this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.